Hey there guys, what is going on? I know we made one of these videos very recently, comparing two of my absolute favourite Akimbo pistol varieties in the game, the M19 and of course the X16. But I've been asked to compare the M19 and of course the Akimbo Renetti. And I've actually come up with a fairly interesting result that I wasn't exactly expecting, but you'll have to wait until the end of the video to find out what we actually think about these two weapons. I also mentioned in the video the other day that there was a bit of a discrepancy with some of the Akimbo pistols. They force lower the fire rate of these particular weapons, so I asked around. I left some comments, I did some tweeting, and I actually found out from your boy Drifter, basically, they had to change this in the middle of the game. The pistols were just simply firing too quickly, and they had to sort of reduce the actual fire rate of them, which is a very interesting thing. I didn't know that before. Of course, just before we do get into comparing these two lovely weapons in this game, about 88% of you guys actually aren't subscribed to the channel. So it would make me very happy here, of course. Very appreciative if you could hit that subscribe button with those notifications turned on. I do very much appreciate it, and it does very much help me out. We're actually looking at getting 4K by the end of the year, so hopefully you guys can help me get there. Right, so let's just jump straight into it here. The Akimbo M19 versus the Akimbo Renetti. Let's find out which is better. Alrighty, so as we did the other day, we're going to be comparing some statistics here today. Of course, we've got fire rate, we've got damage numbers, we've got range, we've got hip fire spreads and stuff like that. We've got all that good stuff, and we're of course comparing our challenger, which is of course the Renetti, and the M19, which is our champion from the other day. And basically we're taking a look at the fire rate first here. Starting us off here with the M19, of course, that has a base fire rate of 307 rounds per minute. You then compare this to the Renetti, which does have a base fire rate of roughly 327 rounds per minute. Of course, all of the numbers that I'm going to mention here have been worked out with the same way. They might not be entirely accurate, like they might not be 100% on the dot for the actual fire rate, but the numbers are at least consistent in that regard. In terms of the lightweight trigger, which you'll definitely want to include on both of these weapons, the fire rate for the M19 does sit at 428 rounds per minute, and of course the Renetti does have a fire rate with the lightweight trigger of 439 rounds per minute, which is of course very interesting. And as you'll see here, the rest of these sort of do follow suit with that regard. A fire rate of 304 rounds per minute with the Akimbo M19, of course, no lightweight trigger on that one, and a very similar number here on the Akimbo Renetti of 307. We did find out the other day that these numbers do actually line up, like they did intentionally nerf the Akimbo basically on the fire rate. It is a little bit of a fire rate cap, and this did happen middle way through the year. And then you look at the Akimbo M19 with the lightweight trigger, which has a fire rate of 404 rounds per minute, and of course the Akimbo Renetti, which has a fire rate of 416 with the lightweight trigger. So as you can see across the board there, Renetti does have an increase to its fire rate across the board over the M19. So if you are playing at home and keeping score, that is 1-0 to the Renetti, which is of course very interesting when we did look at the other day's video. And next statistic is of course base range, which is roughly 10 meters for both. Like, as your sort of standard distance without any attachments, you're going to be fighting at about 10 meters. And you're going to be getting the kills that you would normally expect, which we'll talk about the actual damage numbers in just a second. And for mostly anecdotal reasons, the Renetti does seem to be a little bit better at range, but that's purely just speculation. I've actually got no data for that kind of thing, and in my opinion, they both got fairly similar ranges, so I wouldn't actually consider this a win on either side, so we'll call it a draw in terms of base and damage range. Our damage numbers is our next statistic here, of course, and the M19, depending on where you do shoot people, does of course have a variety of different damage numbers that you can get, meaning we can get up to a 2-shot kill. If you are hitting 2 headshots, you'll get 72 damage per, and you'll get a 2-shot kill. If you're hitting like chest and stomach and stuff like that, you'll typically get a 3 to 6 shot kill, which the other day we did describe it as like a 3 to 4 shot kill. As most standard shots, like most standard distance, you'll get a 3 to 4 shot kill. And when you do compare this, of course, to the Renetti, the numbers are, unsurprisingly, like the X16, exactly the same. 72, 42, 36, and 33 across the board, depending on where you do hit people. So we can't split these two either. Basically, you're going to get a 2-shot kill if you do hit 2 headshots. You're going to get your 3-shot kill if you're shooting someone in the chest, body, like arms and stuff like that. It varies. But the thing we can see here is that both these weapons do basically the exact same amount of damage here. Reload speed is of course up next, as we did in the other day's video. M19 has a stock reload speed of 2.14 seconds when you do compare this to the Renetti. The Renetti does have a favourable outcome here of 1.74 seconds, which you would think that does give us a win to the Renetti side, but as we found out the other day, the Akimbo M19 does have a reload speed of about 2.6 seconds, and the Akimbo X16 has a reload speed of about 2.6 seconds, and guess what? The Renetti Akimbo also has a reload speed of about 2.6 seconds. Now this was a little bit inconsistent. I mean, I did get numbers of about 2.55 to about 2.69, which is really nice. but the numbers are in the ballpark figure of about 2.6. So again, we can't split them on a reload speed number because I believe they're going to be mostly the same in terms of reload speed with an Akimbo pistol. Now, magazine size is of course up next, and the M19 might get a little bit of an advantage here. A base magazine size of 17 rounds, which is very, very interesting. And then you compare that to the Renetti, of course, which is 15 rounds, which, I mean, that's hardly a difference. It's like not really a difference at all, but we can still call that in favor of the M19. And then you look at the maximum magazine attachments that you can get for both of these particular weapons, which is sort of depending up to you whether you want to take them. In terms of the maximum magazine for the M19, we're looking at 32 rounds, and then the Renetti, we are looking at 27 rounds. So they are both very, very close in terms of the actual magazine size we can go with, but the M19 does have the victory here. So that would be a score of 1 apiece for the M19 and of course the Renetti here. Next, we are going to be looking at the hip fire spread, and as we did mention this in the last video we made on this particular subject, it is very, very hard to tell which hip fire spread is actually better. They are very, very similar in terms of actual size, and when I threw both of the images in Photoshop, I really couldn't tell a difference. I mean, there might be a difference either side, but I mean, it really doesn't make too much difference. And when you consider that moving around also reduces the consistency, like it blooms out when you slide, when you sprint around and stuff like that, it really doesn't matter how good your hip fire spread is because they're both going to be very, very similar, and the kind of difference we're talking here is not actually going to be significant in terms of how easy it is for you to get kills with these particular weapons, so let's just chalk it up as another draw. I mean, the differences would be so small that it's almost undetectable, and I can't really call it either way. But when we do compare the recoil spread side by side, we actually have a similar result as we saw the other day. The Akimbo M19 does have that little bit of extra increased vertical recoil. I'll show the picture on screen here. You can see that it does sort of track up a little bit more than you would probably expect for something like this, and you do actually have to pull down on your stick or your mouse quite heavily to try and get those bullets on target. And then you look at the Akimbo Renetti recoil spread here, and it's absolutely perfect. Like, it's nice, it's tight. Like, you look at this thing, there's very little recoil here. Most of the bullets do fire in pretty much the same spot. There's just a nice little grouping, a nice little ball. And that's from about 10 meters away, which is, of course, as we spoke about earlier, a reasonable damage range. Like, you're going to get your 3 to 4 shot kills here, maybe up to like 5 or 6, depending on if you're hitting limbs and stuff like that. But if you do land those bullets in this kind of recoil that we see here, you're going to be getting easy kills. So I do actually have to award the recoil spread to the Akimbo Renetti, which is, again, a little bit surprising, and that M19 does have quite the significant little bit of a recoil pattern. So again, it is 2-1 in favor of the Renetti here. And that is, of course, the last statistic that we're going to be taking a look at here today. So I have to award the victor of this little comparison video to the Akimbo Renetti, which is very, very interesting. I wasn't expecting the M19 to lose out today, but we have a victory of 2-1 to the Renetti. I mean, a lot of the statistics here are very, very similar, but when you actually take a look at the finer details, the Renetti does seem to be a little bit better. It even has a higher DPS number, which we didn't talk about. That's more for Warzone and stuff like that. But as with most things with both of these weapons, they're just very, very similar. So the Renetti does get the W here today, and let's talk about a class setup that we would go for this particular weapon here. So if we were looking at a class setup for the Renetti that I would go for, as we mentioned through all of the statistics that we've presented here today, I believe that the Akimbo Renetti is actually better than anything that we've presented previously. And of course, these are the attachments that we'd go with here. And this little suggestion here is, of course, courtesy of Abdog. And we want to start with, of course, that monolithic suppressor. The sound suppression and damage range, as well as the increased square bullet velocity, is a really, really nice place to start here. Then you move, of course, to the 5mm laser for that hip fire accuracy and sprint to fire speed, which is really, really nice to get those weapons up very quickly if we are sprinting around. Of course, we want to have that lightweight trigger for the maximum fire rate, especially since we are competing against the Akimbo perk for that fire rate. So the maximum bonus that we can get here is, of course, a very, very good thing. Then, if you are planning on using this as your only weapon, or you want to run a longer streak style class setup, or you're running like an MP5 or something like that, you can throw on these maximum magazines. Like that 9mm extra ammo is, of course, very, very nice here, and it gives you extra magazine ammo capacity, longer fights and stuff like that. But if you aren't really considering that, if you're just going to run around and just sort of shoot people at close range, like as a proper sidearm, you probably just want to throw on that XRK speed grip for that sprint to fire speed. Aim down sight, of course, does not mean anything here, so sprint to fire speed is a really, really nice option. And then lastly, of course, we want that Akimbo perk. Of course, a very interesting video here today. I do appreciate you sticking all the way through it. If you made it this far, I was actually a little bit surprised, as we did find out here today that the Renetti is actually a little bit better than the M19. It's not a lot better. Like, there's not a huge gap between these two weapons, but as of the statistics that we've presented today, the Renetti is actually better than the M19. So this will be now my pistol of choice in the last couple of days of this game. Thank you very much for watching this one. Of course, I do very much appreciate you sticking all the way through. But as I mentioned at the start of the video, 88% of you guys who are watching this are not subscribed. So I really would appreciate it if you did take the time to hit that subscribe button for me. We are still looking for 4K by the end of the year, and I would be massively appreciative if we could get there. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye!